Jumanji had like a 2-to-1 lead amongst people who were playing the deck, but...
Okay, and here we come. So we're bringing you round 2. Lewis's match finished fast enough that we've got another feature match for you this round. We have Levin, who has had a string of great finishes in the Open Series recently. And we've got the deck that's being brought for us right now. We're in game 2. Looks like Sleury picked up the first game. So on your right is Levin. That's who's pictured right now. He's playing, looks like a pretty standard blue, white, red list. Probably the same one Jerry's playing. I see the one Inferno Titan main deck, which Jerry was telling me about.
He also has the Linvalas on the board.
He also has the Linvalas in the sideboard. And so, so Drew's list looks probably pretty close to Jerry's. And then on the other end, we've got, not only is the mirror match, but he also has the one Inferno Titan main deck. The interesting thing that Aaron has going on is he has 4 Cunning Spark Mages in his main 60 cards, which could pose a problem if his plan's going to be to suit up Squadron Hawks. Granted, it doesn't kill a Mystic or anything, but still, knocking down all your opponent's Squadron Hawks.
He's a collar in his hand. That thing kills Mystics.
That is very true, and he does have the one Basilisk Collar main deck, which he managed to draw here.
Boom.
All right. Yep.
And that's the power of Linvala here. Now, Aaron may have cited out his Day of Judgments. So, I mean, his plan at this point kind of just becomes, all right, well, I have to cast a Basilisk Collar and, like, bash through with a sorted guy. Because I cannot kill this Linvala. I don't have a card in my deck that kills this right now.
Okay. And so players are slowly amassing their resources. That Linvala is doing a pretty good job of shutting off that Spark Mage.
Yeah, now the Squadron Hawks from Aaron are a lot less impressive than one might expect. Like, even if he swords up a Squadron Hawk, Linvala still blocks it. His real option here is he needs to get that collar next to a sword on one guy.
Yeah, I mean, that'll do a lot of good work, because then Linvala can't really afford to block. Otherwise, Spark Mage Collar gets active, and it's all downhill from there.
That's it.
Yeah, those main deck Spark Mages, I mean, even though they're being shut off by Linvala right now, we didn't get to see the first game, but I would imagine they were probably a huge factor in the first game victory there.
It wouldn't surprise me at all.
So, Drew, considering his options, he's got a good position here, but he's got to be careful it doesn't get taken away from him. As for their sideboards, in Drew's sideboard, he's got Cunning Spark Mage.
Ooh.
Oh, there goes Jace.
Jace is so strong here.
Yeah, that Jace is phenomenal. Now, if he puts the color on the Squadron Hawk, the Hawk can still whittle away maybe at Jace, but I mean
it's only going to take one counter. Drew's going to get at least a couple brainstorms out of this.
Right, and even if it just goes attack, okay, +2 brainstorm, that's so many brainstorms that'll put Drew so far ahead in this matchup. All he has to do is find a way to protect that Linvala, and then maybe get his sword online, and he's just going to be ridiculously ahead in this matchup. And that's really what I feel the matchup is defined on: is who can hit with their sword first, who can shut off, their opponent's trumps first, and landing Jace first is obviously huge as well. Now, it looks like Aaron has Jace in his hand. He's probably going to opt to trade with Drew's. You just have to get that Jace off the board.
Yeah, the fact that he just Fade Sealed makes the re-Jace a pretty standard play.
Right.
Now, one thing that's interesting, like when I've watched the match, it seems like the early game is this sword game, and then as soon as both players have 5 lands in hand, there's just a Planeswalker war. And then it ends very quickly. And that's kind of been what I've noticed in Clawblade Mirrors. So,
all right. And the other interesting thing about like Planeswalkers in this matchup is with the addition of red. I mean, before you could whittle them down with Squadron Hawks, but with red, you just have to worry about Lightning Bolt. I mean, which is why Drew had to go +2 there, because he doesn't just want to get Lightning Bolted and have his have his Planeswalker die. But at the same time, he goes +2. His opponent plays Jace, and then they just trade off, and Drew's not that much further ahead than where he started. But then again, neither is Aaron, so it's really just a fair trade. Okay, so here comes down Spark Mage, and that's going to do quite a bit of work for Drew.
Yeah, Drew's Spark Mage is a lot better than Aaron's Spark Mage.
The fact that it can use his activated ability is a good start.
Yes.
And once that Spark Mage knocks off Aaron's Spark Mage, then worrying about his Linvala being removed is going to become a lot less high on that priority list. I mean, obviously that Linvala is still good. It's still doing things, shutting off the Stoneforge Mystic and so on, but...
And Aaron has a second Spark Mage in his hand.
Yeah. I imagine... So he cast that Stoneforge Mystic earlier. Do we know if he got the Basilisk Collar or the Sword of Body Mind in his hand? I guess we don't know.
When he cast the Stoneforge Mystic?
Yeah.
He went and found the collar.
He found the collar, okay. Because he also has a sword in his hand, which is why I was curious. Okay.
He does have the sword.
And so Aaron comes down with a Jace, and considering his options, chooses to scry 1.
Now his play here until Drew played that Cunning Spark Mage was probably going to be, I'll bounce your Linvala, then I'll equip my thing and I'll shoot your whatever. But now things look pretty bad for him. Now Drew just played put some type of equipment into play on his opponent's end step. I believe it's a Sword of Feast and Famine, though I'm not 100% certain on that. Yeah, if Drew just equips that sword onto his Linvala and crashes, his opponent's in a rough way. Interesting. I guess he wants to kill the Jace, and he doesn't necessarily feel like putting any mana into using the sword right now.
Alright, so Drew's slowly getting everything active and beginning to take an advantage here. He's like, no, you can't Stoneforge Mystic. I've got this Linvala in play.
Yeah. It's like, my card does stuff. Linvala is just such a mirror breaker here. Drew has 2 copies in his deck. A lot of people I've heard advocating 3, so...
Of Linvala?
Of Linvala.
Yeah.
In the sideboard. The sideboard has become so Spark Mage intensive now that that card is just very powerful.
Well, and plus, I mean, if you're able to correctly predict that a deck like green-white might rise up, it seems like a pretty good against those. I mean, you shut off all their Linamore Elves, all their Birds of Paradise, you shut off their
Fauna Shaman.
Mystic, Fauna Shaman. I mean, Linvala is the ultimate card against that deck, so having access to it in that matchup could be huge as the tournament goes long. It looks like Lewis's deck is pretty well poised.
Yeah.
So Aaron just drops a natural sort of body in mind there.
I feel like the deck has to play the Linvala on turn 4, so there's probably not as much value as one might think against the green deck, because they've you're on the ropes at that point.
Potentially. I mean, it definitely, like, turning off their Birds of Paradise and their Linamore Elves aren't going to do as much, but still, if you're able to control the early game, shutting off potential Fauna Shamans could still be a absolute
Oh yeah,
backbreaker.
could definitely, like, help out in the late game.
And in those games where you keep the Linamore Elf or Bird of Paradise intensive draws, you can just totally cut off their avenue of attack. And so, so Linvala crashes in, starts to peck away at Aaron's life total.
Drew just has this game locked up. We can expect to see a game 3 very shortly.
The situation is certainly looking good for Drew. The double Cunning Spark Mage, the only way I could see Aaron maybe getting out of this is if he left in his Day of Judgments and was able to land one here. Drew only has Celestial Colonnade up. Oh no, and he packs it in. So yeah, we're going to be going to a game 3 shortly.
You know, Linvala's just completely broke that match wide open.
Yep.
If Drew's hand if Drew had a hand that did not have that one card in it, there was almost no way he could win that match at all.
Yeah, I mean, that Linvala was just absolutely huge. It just shows you, like, it's just a game of trumps, right? Like, you know, last week the trump was Cunning Spark Mage. Well, all right, now the trump is Linvala, you know? So
yeah,
what
Linvala
comes next?
Does very well against that. Yeah. Nick Spagnuolo just came by. He informed us that he is 2-0.
No, the camera.
I don't think so. Did you?
Nick, do you want to come on screen? Well, not on screen, but on voice anyway. Just feel free to come around and pull over the chair.
And now we have a game 3 here.
Okay, Nick says he'll come by later.
Now, Aaron wisely, you know, a lot of people are afraid to change their plan, to think, well, okay, my normal sideboard plan is this against this deck, this is how I sideboard against this deck. But Aaron saw the Linval, and Aaron was like, well, I just can't beat that card unless I have Day of Judgment. So we're seeing some Day of Judgments come back into his deck here.
Players shuffle up. Do we think that Drew Levin is going to be making any sideboard changes here?
I wouldn't be surprised to see some Sun Titan come in. I mean, he can be somewhat sure that his opponent's looking at the Day of Judgments in his board. Sun Titan is an awful good way to recover from a day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
they're still going to have a Spark Mage War.
I thought maybe
there's still a Spark Mage War going on.
Right. I thought maybe he might have brought in that Sun Titan already, but maybe not.
The difference in the Sun Titan War now is that Aaron has Days and Drew has Linvalas. I feel like that definitely favors Drew.
Yeah, I mean, those Linvalas looked so good in the second game. Wow. Just, I mean, the position was looking okay for Aaron. You know, we had that Spark Mage, you had a Caller coming down. It was looking like it was going to be threatening, and then bam, Linvala shuts it off. We even saw Aaron just mystified. He tried to activate his Stoneforge Mystic. Nope, can't do that, you know? Such an absolute breaker in that matchup. And if the games aren't ended early with, you know, maybe a fast sword or something, that could be what decides the match. Just, you know, like in the long game, shutting off your opponent's ways of attrition, like Cunning Spark Mage, or ways to, you know, shut off your Squadron Hawks. That's going to be huge.
It's going to be interesting. It's, you know, in the beginning, the games are just like these weird games. They're both people playing these mid-range aggro decks and attacking each other. And then as the game progresses, like in the mid-game now, that both of them have Spark Mage package, and in the long game, both of them have Planeswalkers. Yeah. So it's like a very, like, this is a laddered game where you have different phases. All right. Aaron's got a pretty good opener.
And what do we see there? So he's got Temur Expand.
Looks like he has a Preordain, a Lightning Bolt, Jace, and some other cards. So he's got what he needs to make it to the point where he's casting a Jace.
And it seems like you said, if the matchup is truly has an early game dominated by swords, like making sure that you can get to the point where, you know, you can turn off the Stoneforge Mystics, or you can turn off the fast drops, so you can get to the Jace part of the game. I mean, that's huge. And so here's going to come that Preordain, and I'd guess it's likely going to be followed up by Celestial Colonnade.
Sean's going to be looking for a land here.
Yeah. So he's figuring out where he wants to set up his Preordains. He sets them both back on top, finds that Arid Mesa, and lays that Colonnade, and passes on back. How do you feel about Spell Pierce in this matchup?
Spell Pierce?
Yes.
I think Spell Pierce is a pretty good card. I like having at least a couple copies. Gives people the fear. So I think our list ended up having 2 when it came time to go.
That's one of the big differences between these two lists is Aaron does not have any Spell Pierces in his main deck, while Drew has 3, and I mean, Aaron doesn't have access to any between his main deck or his sideboard. And it could be huge. Of course, you can't counter the creatures that way, which is a big difference. So Stoneforge Mystic came down, and he found a Sword of Feast and Famine. And now he's pretty content to just wait till the end of Aaron's turn to put it onto the battlefield. Aaron does have a Lightning Bolt, correct, in his hand. We did see that. So, you know, if Drew spends time equipping, it's not going to do a lot. And Drew hastily slams that sword into play.
Puts that Sword of Feast and Famine into play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Such a powerful spell.
The sword is... Well, we were talking, like, is Sword of Feast and Famine better than Sword of Fire and Ice? I mean...
No.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's pretty good.
Like, like when it hits them, it's like you're taking a time walk. It's free to equip. On the turn you're going to hit them with it. It's just so powerful. But perhaps
yeah, but you don't. I mean, they discard a card as opposed to you like killing something and drawing a card.
We had this debate. I was on Sword of Iron Ice's side originally, but Jeff Cunningham was a firm defender that Sword of Feast and Famine was better, not close. It's an interesting discussion. We'll get that in between rounds. In the meantime,
Jace is definitely the 2 best swords ever made.
Sure. And so those Jaces trade off, and pretty much at board parity, except Drew's got that sword, which is threatening them in the long game. And looks like Aaron is gonna, yep.
He's probably going to go and get his collar again.
Think he's going for the collar or a sword of his own here?
I'd imagine he'd get a collar here.
Nope. And here comes out the sword.
I mean, he has Spark Mage in hand. Surprising to me. Maybe he already has it. I don't know.
For those
I guess let's stick a Spark Mage.
Yeah, and here comes down with that Spark Mage.
Or sword.
I think
he's on sword plan.
All right.
That seems fine.
Yeah, I mean, like hitting them with sword is so huge. If he can't answer that Stoneforge Mystic here, it's going to be a big deal. Just that swing, discarding a card and oh wow.
Red mana.
So he does find his red. So now Drew has access to Lightning Bolt.
No, I'm not sure if Drew has a bolt in his hand, but I mean, just him threatening that makes the equip swing play a lot scarier for Aaron. Now Gideon. That's Drew says, "All right, you're still trying to play this early game. I want to get to the end game."
And it's also pretty good defense against swords, right? You're like, well, I could equip my guy and serve him with sword, but I just get to attack Gideon and don't get the sword's effect. Do not trigger when you hit Planeswalkers. So Aaron is going for, he's going to equip.
Goes ahead and equips.
And it looks like he's flicking around. Is that 2 Cunning Spark Mages and a Squadron Hawk? I saw at least those 2. Or maybe there's a land back there. Is that a Day of Judgment? Something. All right, and here comes Cunning Spark
Mage. Passes back.
All right. And that Spark Mage will help whittle away at Gideon. It means,
the Spark Mage still has a lot of value.
Yes,
Drew has not drawn a Linvala or played one.
Yep. I mean, that Gideon can still potentially kill the Spark Mage, but it's going to, take him some time. It means Drew can't really afford to go for Squadron Hawk. And it looks like Drew has another Stoneforge Mystic in his hand, so we might see that coming down. Let's see, so there's like a Plains for sure. Yep, and here comes the Mystic.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see him find a sort of a different color.
Perhaps, yes. Although there is no red sword right now, which is surprisingly huge. But maybe, you think he goes for Basilisk Scholar here? Is he going to bank on maybe finding his own Cunning Spark Mages?
Ooh, that could be
yeah, he does. Strong. He goes for Basilisk Scholar.
Yeah, I mean, if he has a Spark Mage of his own, that's clearly the right play.
And, yeah, so he finds that
Let's see what
collar.
He does with this Gideon.
I think you probably +2 to try and buy time, but I could definitely see the argument for just shooting down that Stoneforge Mystic while you still can.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the issue with shooting down the Stoneforge Mystic is that...
Or sorry, yeah, you kill the Stoneforge Mystic. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. What's the issue with shooting down the Stoneforge Mystic?
Well, if you want to shoot the Stoneforge... if you want to just kill the Stoneforge Mystic, then you put your opponent in a spot where if he has the collar in his hand, you're in a lot of trouble, and if he doesn't, you're in an absolutely commanding position.
Sure.
Like, things get very, very difficult for your opponent now.
Right. And Drew equips that sword, which also defends against Cunning Spark Mage Backlash. So he can't go equip the sword to my Spark Mage, attack Gideon for 2.
Also, Gideon making Aaron's creatures attack, it makes the Cunning Spark Mage a lot less tricky.
Right.
So Drew can actually do things like play his Hawk and equip the sword on the same turn and make it dodge the Spark Mage.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
Absolutely. I mean, it also just gives him out to killing that Cunning Spark Mage, because he forces Aaron to tap it main phase with the Gideon in play, and if Gideon has 2 counters on it, he could use it to off the Spark Mage.
Yeah.
And so what is Aaron looking to do here? Drew is slowly taking control of the game back. Looks like Aaron has a Squadron Hawk, which is going to be great. But
Squadron Hawk's not too shabby here.
I'm sure he's a little wary, though. Like, well, does Drew have Day of Judgment in his deck? Like, I don't want to walk right into that. But yeah, you probably just have to go for some Hawks here.
Yeah, a fleet of Hawks isn't really that big of a deal to run into a day when you think about it.
Right.
It's really not that many cards.
I mean, especially when you still have, 2 or 3 Hawks in your hand, right?
Yeah. It's like, I used a half a card, and now I still have 2 more things that I can equip these swords onto.
And
you just make everything into such a threat.
And so that Gideon is going to be taken down by the Colonnade. And so now there's the predicament for Aaron, where if Drew attacks with the Stoneforge Mystic, well, do you block here? Do you block with your Cunning Spark Mage and throw it away?
Well, I mean, it depends. Like, Drew's tagging pre-combat. I mean, I think even if you only have stuff to play post-combat as Drew, I think if you want the block, I think you play stuff pre-combat.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he's going pre-combat. So Drew's got Inferno Titan in his hands, which could turn into a big issue with that Basilisk Collar if Aaron goes for anything. I mean, Aaron could untap and play Sun Titan, and
Basilisk Collar on Inferno Titan, that is a
yeah,
does not matter how many creatures you have. You're in a rough way.
Yeah. Now, if Aaron, I know you said he brought in his days, right? Yep. And here it is.
Yeah.
Day of Judgment knocks
Brought
down
this
his
back
team,
in.
and Drew is clearly not too happy about losing his Inferno Titan there. I'm sure he calculated the risks, and he was like, well, I'm going to go for it. And then Squadron Hawk is going to be a huge
deterrent. And just like that, Aaron's back in this game.
Yeah, and he even has the time to crack a land and either equip that sword or play another Hawk.
Yeah, I mean, Drew may have made a mistake by playing that Inferno Titan. He had the Stoneforge in play. He had a board advantage. He didn't necessarily have to go that far.
I mean, I'm sure it was just a calculated risk. I don't know if it was necessarily a mistake. He thought about it, and he was like, well, maybe he's got the day. He didn't see any in the second game, and he thought maybe he was safe, but Aaron brought them back in.
Yeah. And it's something he just absolutely needed to do. Now, if Drew has a Squadron Hawk of his own here, he has the anti-Hawk, which is the Hawk plus Collar. It pretty much prevents a Hawk from attacking, regardless of how many swords it's carrying in its talons. Aaron's re-sleeving a card. Taking a little bit of time. It's good to carry a few extra sleeves during these matches so that you don't...
Alright. And yeah, so he's going to suit up that Squadron Hawk. And Levin preordains.
Drew's going to draw.
Preordain is just so powerful. Like, it's so amazing.
Oh, yeah, it just makes your deck so consistent.
Yeah, on turn 1, it's great. And then again, on turn 10 or 12 or whatever this is, it's another great one. And yeah, wow, he found a Jace. That's a Linvala hiding there. Now, granted, Linvala isn't unbelievable here, but it still blocks that Squadron Hawk and shuts it off, which seems pretty awesome to me. You can suit it up with that collar and that sword and really punch through. So that could be a big deal for Drew going late in the game.
I mean, Drew's got a lot of potential here. The big issue is, though, that Jace is going to eat a sword hit. It's probably just going to die right now. unless Aaron has a truly filthy hand where Aaron can play something big and then wants to hit Drew with the Hawk and then untap all of his lands.
All right, so Aaron pushes both of his creatures, and he animates his Colonnade.
Yeah, so the Colonnade takes care of the Jace, and the Squadron Hawk makes Drew discard a card and lets Aaron untap all of his lands.
So good with those man lands.
Pretty powerful chain of events happening there.
Yeah, it's just totally free, which is unbelievable.
When we're in this bathroom.
Go ahead. And yeah, Drew thinking about what he's going to do to come back into this one. And Linvala comes on down. It's just a tight game between the two of them. Like, it's not really haymakers back and forth. It's just careful play and big swings back and forth. But it's very calculated, very careful, and both players are navigating the battlefield, trying to figure out what the correct course of actions is. And Aaron packs him in. Time was called? Time must have been called, and the game ends up being
a draw.
A draw. That's what it looks like.
Yep.
Yeah, 1-1-1.
All right.
I guess we didn't get where the time was called in the match, so I mean, it makes sense. It's a back and forth control game. Like, they're both playing very carefully, trying to figure out what the right course of action is, and ended up resulting in a draw.
Yeah. Drew seems discontented with the result.
Yeah. I mean, I think if that game continues, Drew